Hey friends, Peter Faciano here. Welcome to my series on the Canon M6 Mark II and the start of my series on the R6. In today's video, what I'm going to attempt to do is talk about the specifications of both of these cameras. I need to break this up into two videos. My first one is just looking at the specs, comparing them, seeing what the difference is on paper, and then in my second video, I'm going to take them out into the field and then hopefully come back with some footage, some video, and some photos that are going to give you a better indication on whether or not there's really a $1,400 difference between this camera and this camera. And if you're actually thinking about going full frame, should you go to an RP, an R, or should you jump right to the R6? Let's go ahead and jump into today's video. So to some extent, this is going to be actually comparing apples to oranges just because of the sensor sizes. But if you look past the sensors, the other specifications of these cameras are very similar, so that's why I kind of want to throw this in there just as a comparison. So let's go ahead and talk about the sensors. The M6 Mark II has a 32.5 megapixel aps-c CMOS sensor powered by the Digic 8 processor. The ISO ranges from 100 to 25,600, expandable to 51,200. The R6 sensor is a 20.1 megapixel full frame CMOS sensor powered by the Digic X processor. The ISO ranges from 100 to 102,400, expandable to 204,800. Now, talking about megapixels, you hear this all the time, that the more megapixels, the better. But that's not always necessarily the case. Just because you have more megapixels doesn't necessarily mean that it's better and you're not going to get a better quality picture. So for instance, the aps-c sensor is a smaller sensor and it has 32.5 megapixel. So we're jamming, like I did this. Canon is putting all these megapixels on a small sensor, which decreases the low light performance. And the higher you push the ISOs, the more noise or grain you're going to introduce into your picture. And it's not necessarily that great, as opposed to the full frame sensor. So it's a larger sensor, 21 or 20.1 megapixels are on a larger sensor. The pixels are bigger. You get a better low light performer. And as you start moving higher and higher into your ISOs, or ISOs, however you want to pronounce it, you end up having a better picture quality. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about megapixels and whether or not more megapixels is better. In this situation, you're going to get a little bit more grain and noise into your photos with the M6 Mark II as opposed to those same settings with the R6. All right, moving on to the frame rates. It's important to know here that you have to pay attention to your battery power in the M6, and then on the back of the camera, if you have your drive modes set into the high frame rate, make sure it's set to the high frame rate with that plus sign on it. If you have a compatible lens and your battery is charged, that icon will glow green. In the M6 Mark II, it's just a white icon, and just make sure that it's set to high plus frame rate. And in the M6 Mark II, we're looking at 14 frames per second with the mechanical shutter. The electronic shutter, it's only single shot mode, so as fast as you can depress the shutter button or the shutter release, you can get a picture taken. On the other hand, the R6 can shoot 12 frames per second mechanical and 20 frames per second electronic. And again, just pay attention to the green highlight on the back of the R6. If it's not green, you can't achieve those high frame rates. And the shutter in the R6 is pretty quiet. So when we're looking at the 14 frames, so right now I have the green H plus highlighted, so I know that it's 14 frames per second. Here's what it sounds like. As opposed to the M6 Mark II, I'm set in the high plus frame rate. This is what it sounds like. So definitely a noticeable difference in the sound that they're making. All right, next up are the mounts for these two cameras. The first one, the M6 Mark II, has an M series mount. So if you have any M series glass, you can put this on natively. If you own any EF, EFS, or any third-party lenses, you're able to put that on the camera as well, as long as you have the EF to M adapter, which costs a little bit more. The RF lenses will not operate on this camera. There are no mounts or adapters that are available for that. The R6 is an RF mount. Any RF glass will mount natively to the camera, and if you pick up an EF to RF adapter, you can mount any of your EF lenses directly to the camera. Now, at the time of shooting this video right now, there really are no third-party lenses available for the RF mount, so just keep that in mind. But if you do have any of the EF lenses and you have the adapter, you can go ahead and put that on there as well. Everything will work just fine. All right, let's go ahead and move on to autofocus and the stats on that. The M6 Mark II has 143 autofocus points. It covers 88% horizontally, 100% vertically. It does have dual pixel autofocus. It has human eye detect, lock-on tracking, touch and drag autofocus. The R6 has 1,053 face detect autofocus points. It has 100% coverage, dual pixel AF2. It has eye detect for humans. It also has animal eye detect as well. It has lock-on tracking, touch and drag autofocus, and when you're in manual focusing mode, it does have these focus guides that let you know when your object is absolutely in focus. So those stats are pretty comparable, and that's what I was talking about when we're looking at some of the specifics on paper. They look very similar, but when I get out in the field, we'll actually take a look and see how these things perform. And obviously one of the big advantages that the R6 has over the M6 Mark II is the animal eye detect. And something that I haven't mentioned just yet is the 5-axis IBIS, the in-body image stabilization that the R6 has, but the M6 Mark II does not. And it's a night and day difference when you're using that in-body image stabilization in the R6, and then when you pick the M6 Mark II back up, it's crazy good. So keep that in mind as well. Moving right along, memory cards. The M6 Mark II has one UHS-2 card slot, and it can shoot 23 raw photos before the buffer kicks in. The R6 has two SD card slots, both UHS-2. It writes photos to both, but it only writes video to one. And you can get up to 240 raw shots before the buffer kicks in. Now, if you're a 2 card slot type of person where you absolutely need to have something backed up, then obviously the R6 has you here. And don't forget, the M6 Mark II, you can connect it to the Canon Camera Connect app, and you can automatically back up a copy of your photos and video directly to the Canon Connect app. So if you absolutely need to have backup, there's your option right there. Let's go ahead and move on to some of the video features now. The M6 Mark II shoots in full width 4K, 24 frames per second, UHD, shoots in an MOV file, H.264. It can shoot 180p up to 120 frames per second with no audio or autofocus. The R6 shoots in full frame DCI 4K up to 60 frames per second in 10-bit 422 H.265. DCI is shot in 4K oversampled from 1.5K with no pixel binning. It also shoots 180p up to 120 frames per second, and you have the option to shoot in C-Log. Both cameras have a micro HDMI port, and the recording limit is set to 29 minutes and 59 seconds. Blah, 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 blah. I don't know about you guys, but those numbers, I mean, H.264, 265, 10-bit, 8-bit, 12-bit, 94-bit. I know those numbers mean something, but I kind of want to see what the camera looks like. Does it shoot good footage? Yes or no? I mean, those numbers do mean something, and I don't want to discount the fact that the R6 or the R5 or the M6 Mark II, they all have specific video functions. But to me, I want to know what it looks like. Now let's go ahead and wrap up this video and talk about the stabilization, the EVS, the touch panel, and any of the other comparable features of the camera. Let's go ahead and jump into those. The M6 Mark II does not have in-body image stabilization, but it does have digital stabilization. It does not have an EVF, but you can buy one separately. And if you do, you can pick up the DC2, which has 2.36 million dots. It is a 3-inch 1.04 million dot tilting touchscreen. The LCD screen is a touch screen, so you can pretty much basically touch everything. Camera comes with Bluetooth Wi-Fi. It does not have a compatible battery grip, and it does take the LPE17 batteries, and it does not USB charge. The camera comes in at 14.39 ounces or 408 grams, and it has a mode dial on the top with no LCD screen. The R6 does have 5-axis in-body image stabilization. You can get up to 8 stops with certain lenses, but the majority of them, you can get just about 7 in most lenses if they don't have stabilization built into the lens. The EVF is 3.69 million dot. It comes with a 3-inch 1.62 million dot variable angle touchscreen, and the LCD screen, just like the M6 Mark II. You can touch everything. The numbers on the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth are 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi, and the Bluetooth is 4.2. The camera is battery grip compatible with the B6 R10 battery grip. The camera takes an LPE6NH battery with USB charging capabilities. The camera comes in at 1.5 pounds or 680 grams, and just like the M6 Mark II, it has a mode dial at the top with no LCD screen. Okay guys, there we go. Those are all the specs of the camera. It's all laid out in front of you. I don't know about you, but I'm spec'd out. So the next thing I need to do is actually take these cameras out, do some real world shooting, and actually see what really is the difference in photo and video with these two. We'll come back, we'll get a video all published with that, and then just move on from there. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I know it was a lot of numbers. It was a lot of, statistics. And do me a favor, for the people that actually like looking at stats, if I got something wrong, let me know down below. I'm not a technical person. I'm not a stats person. So hopefully the things that I did put in the video are correct. Let me know if they weren't. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it. So like, share, subscribe. If you're new to the channel and you're not a subscriber, go ahead and subscribe. Just go ahead and click in that little icon down there, and that will be good. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this again, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye. Oh, too many stats for one day. We'll see you.